Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting until Zoom populates our audience, so we'll be starting in just a few moments. Another good morning to people who are just joining. We're just waiting for Zoom to get everyone into the webinar, so we'll be starting in just a moment. Thank you for joining us. That looks pretty good. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Spring Gardening Webinar series presented by the Central Oregon Master Gardeners, Oregon State University, and our sponsors. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful snowy April day. My name is Janet Dart, and I will be your host. Master Gardener Phil Paterno is assisting behind the scenes. Our presenter is Vickie Miner, and she will be telling us about how the gardening battle can be won in Central Oregon. But first, some housekeeping for our webinar. All videos and microphones are off, except for the presenters. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A window, which you can access at the bottom of your screen. We will reserve time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that were not addressed during the slide presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available online for 30 days following the session. In a few days, you'll be sent an email with a link to the recording, along with any links that Vickie mentions in her presentation. Today's topic, turn my page. Vickie has been gardening most of her life, with the last 10 years being in Central Oregon. She's been a certified OSU Master Gardener since 2015 and has taught a wide variety of how-to subjects for many years. This class focuses on research-based information that is essential to getting your landscape growing, including what you need to know about climate and the other key issues that impact the types of perennials, shrubs, trees, and annuals that you should plant and what will thrive here. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to Vickie.
So good morning, everyone. It is April Fool's Day, and I woke up this morning to snow in my driveway, on my sidewalks, in my yard, and I just had to laugh. As Janet said, this is the first of our webinar series for 2023, and it is my privilege and honor to be the person to kick off this series. So give me just a moment. I am going to share my screen with you so that you can see my slide presentation. And I am going to also cut off my video because you don't need to really be looking at me talking to you. I think the slides are the star of this show. So hang on just a second. Let me get my slides up. Okay. So I am sure that many of you are like me, where you lived somewhere else before you moved here. For me, that was the East Coast. I was a military brat and spent most of my adult life on the East Coast. And I ended up here because my husband's a native Oregonian, and we made a deal with each other. He would live on the East Coast with me while we were working, and I would come home for him when we retired. And when you live someplace else, you have different gardening skill sets. And when you move here, you have to learn different skills because of our climate challenges. Or you could have been here for many, many years, and you've tried to garden, but you've gotten discouraged because of the climate. So my plan for today is that I will do my best to make our time together worthwhile and informative for you. And my goal is that once we're done, you'll have great tools and resources that will help you become a successful gardener here or enhance your existing gardening skills. This morning and this session, since it's the kickoff session, is about the bigger gardening picture and creating a gardening foundation for you. There are 7 more webinars in our series that are worth attending, and I just want to mention them briefly. At 1 o'clock this afternoon, we have gardening with native plant landscaping here, and you can still register for that up until about half an hour before it starts. Next Saturday, April the 8th at 10 o'clock, can we really grow vegetables in Central Oregon? Very important if you're interested in starting a vegetable garden. And at 1 o'clock, we have a container gardening session. On April the 15th, it's all about raised bed vegetable gardening and irrigation. And then at 1 o'clock, it's all about the mighty weeds and being a mighty avenger to win the battle against the weeds. On April 22nd, which is the last day of our series, which also happens to be Earth Day, in the morning, we have elements of greenhouse construction, and at 1, we have good bugs, bad bugs. The complete schedule and registration link can be found at gocomga.com. That's GOCOMGA.com, the same place that you went to get to me this morning. And if you miss any of the sessions, there are a large number of resources online. Many will be listed at the end of the class today, and you will get those in an email. And we also have a free plant clinic during the growing season at the Extension office. So let's go ahead and get to it. I wanted to share this with you because this has always been my philosophy. 1 part soil, 2 parts water, 3 parts wishful thinking and prayers. But now I know, because I have been gardening here for a number of years now, that if I understand the basics, which I hope to help you with today, we can become very successful gardeners, and I am living proof of that. So, factors. You may have lived like I did in an area where anything grows in the soil, summer is true summer, and the amount of water is not a constant issue. And here, then you move here to Central Oregon, and it can seem daunting to garden here because of the temperature swings, the weather. Like today, it's April the 1st, and we've got snow on the ground. But I want to assure you, it is really not impossible. Successful gardeners know the key factors and work that knowledge into their gardening practices. And if you master the challenges here, you really, truly can garden anywhere. So I'm going to talk about these 6 key areas, as well as some best practices. I'm going to give you a bunch of resources that you can go to anytime. And as we go along, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we will get to them either during or at the end of class. So first up, the pests. I just love this one on the left about the deer, because I have so many neighbors who love to plant tulips. And the tulips come up and they look like they're just about ready to bust open. And the next day you come along and it looks like a machete was taken to those tulips, because the deer have had them as an appetizer. And the little bunnies, oh my gosh, I get these bunnies every year. And the thing is that the pests really will do almost anything to survive, including eating things they normally would not. Our weather's changing. The impact of our drought has directly related to them eating anything they can find to avoid starvation. And it is a huge problem for them and for us. So I'd like to show you a couple of pictures of what some deer damage looks like. This is one, the nibbled plant material in these are all arborvitae. The deer love this stuff. You can see in the picture on the right, the tree on the very, very left is not an arborvitae, and of course it looks pretty not eaten. And the thing is that there's no deer-proof plant material anywhere. And I think most of you probably have figured that out or have known that for a long time. There are, however, things that are more resistant than others, because the deer just don't like things with certain textures and with scent. Little deer, baby deer, young ones, they will nibble anything because they just don't know any better. And if it's a bad winter, they'll all eat anything they can find so that they don't starve to death. Plants that seem to be more immune to deer nibbles are things like Russian sage and many herbs. Some sprays work, but you have to keep reapplying them because they dissipate and they break down in the sunlight or precipitation. There is one that does seem to work better than others because it smells like mint, and that's deer out, but you still have to keep reapplying it. So here's another dining deer. This photo is from several years ago at the Hullins Head Community Garden. And at the time there was no fence and the deer ate everything. And this is like a smorgasbord for this fellow. just coming in. There's so much appetizing food here for this deer. But now there's a fence and the deer don't get in. And the lesson here is that fencing is the best option to keep out the deer, but it needs to be at least 6 feet high. But what happens if you live in an HOA and the HOA won't allow you to have a 6-foot fence? So there are things that you can do, and I want to show you a few slides of some fencing that you might try. This is an example of a double fence system in Bend. And while this has been done with wire and wood, it can also be done with hedges that are 3 to 4 feet apart, and the hedges can be lower grown. And why would that work? Well, deer are great jumpers, but their eyesight's not as good as the way they jump. And if they can't see a clear path to land, they usually won't try to get in. There are always exceptions, but for the most part, they won't try to get in. This fence, oops, let me go back here. There we go. This fence is at the former location of the Northwest Crossing Community Garden before they moved it down to Discovery Park. And it was built to keep the deer out. And this hardscape here, the hardware cloth here, was not put on initially, but then the garden was overrun with the rest of the pests that I'm going to talk about, and they had to install this hardware cloth. And it was buried into the ground. And I'm not quite sure how deep it was, but I know that it was at least 12 to 18 inches down. And then they folded over the top to the outside to keep the pests from crawling up and then climbing into the garden. So what about those other critters? Well, these are those guys. They can do a lot of damage to your landscape. So the guy on the bottom looks like a chipmunk on steroids. And this was a picture that was taken at the Prineville Reservoir. And many people confuse this little guy. He's actually golden-mantled ground squirrel, not a chipmunk. And the difference is the chipmunk, as you see on the left, upper left, the stripes go straight through to the snout. And on the golden-mantled ground squirrel, it doesn't. Both of these critters can do really serious damage to roots, stems, grass, seeds, and all kinds of things like bulbs and tubers. The guy in the upper right is a vole, one of my favorites. They just, especially in the wintertime, they can actually kill trees because they will chew at the bark, and they can girdle the tree because they remove all the bark from the trunk and the stems near the base. And you can have something that looks really quite healthy from the ground up, and if you push it, all of a sudden it just keels right over, because these little guys have chewed all winter long. You can consider chemical controls for these critters, but you must read the label very, very carefully, because there can be residual effects and unintended targets. You can also go to the extreme and build yourself a really, really strong fence. There's certainly plenty enough rock here in our area to do this. But honestly, this is pretty expensive, and I don't think most of you would want to build this kind of a fortress, but what can you do? Well, this resource, and again, you will get this in the email, this is a great resource that is available online, and it has good info on it, and it talks about the basic tactics for dealing with wildlife, blocking access, deterring the pests, removing them. And it has the contact info for various wildlife agencies in our area, which you would want to have handy. So besides the deer and the voles and the golden mantles and the ground squirrels, we also have some insect pests. And I wanted to bring this to you because this is a really important topic for us, especially for anyone who has apple or pear trees or home orchards. We are currently monitoring for the codling moth in Central Oregon, and we're doing that at our demo garden in Redmond. So why are we doing that here? Well, this moth is very destructive to the fruit industry. And if we do our part managing it here in Central Oregon, we can help prevent it from traveling to our apple and fruit producing areas in Oregon. So we don't want to have that economic disaster on our hands because of this moth migrating to the Fruit Loop. This project is an important resource, and sign up is easy, it's free. Emails will be sent to you for all the options to manage the moth, including where it's been found. OSU does all the research, they track the timing, they identify the products to use, and they let you know where you can get those products. This is a very pervasive pest here, and they've been found to overwinter, and they're finding they can hatch 2 to 3 generations, and the second generation seems to be the one doing the most damage. So all of that said, we do have some heroes, some bug heroes. And one of them, everybody, who doesn't love a ladybug? They are so cute and they're wonderful and they look like they're so calm, as this little girl says. You want these good bugs in your garden because I don't know of anyone who has done any kind of extensive gardening or even a little bit of gardening that hasn't experienced the problem of aphids during the summer. And they leave that sticky, shiny residue all over everything. And the ladybugs, you want them in your garden because they love aphids. If you really want a lot of good information about the good and the bad bugs, catch the session on the 22nd of April at 1. Gail Longalotto, who is an entomologist on the OSU faculty, will be the presenter. She's great, and she lives, breathes, and loves bugs. Okay, so what's next? Another important element is our zone. Now, if we were doing this in person, I would have a raise of hands and ask you, how many of you think we're in zone 1, 4, 5, 6, or you have no idea? And it is really important to know where we are in the zones because it has everything to do with what plant material will survive here. And this is a shock to me. It came as a surprise that according to the USDA, our area is a zone 6. But anybody who has gardened here for any period of time will tell you because of the temperature swings, we really need to garden as if we're in a zone 3 to 5. We can have very different growing conditions within the same zip code, even between your back and your front yards. And many of you may also be like I am. I have a sunset gardening book, and it uses the climate zones. And it's a little bit confusing because they're not the same. They don't even have the same numbering as the USDA hardiness zone. Well, the thing about sunset gardening is that that's not a uniformly applied nationwide way of rating plant hardiness, but the USDA hardiness ratings are. So you want to use those, and you'll find them on the plant tags. You'll see this, the one that's here in the slide. And the lower the hardiness zone, the more cold hardy the plant will be. And you can see on this slide, the Coreopsis is hardy all the way down to a zone 3, which is great because we would be able to grow Coreopsis anywhere in our area. If you live in a zone 5 and you buy plants designated for 5 or lower, you're good. But if you see something that's designated higher, it may not survive here. So this is the hardiness breakdown for our area and our communities. You can see on the chart, and remember, USDA rates us as a zone 6, but not one of our communities is really at a 6. The highest rating is a 5. And it seems somewhat counterintuitive that as you go north, the zones get warmer. It's supposed to be, I mean, I always thought go north, you go high, go south, you go low, but not here. It's complete opposite. But note again, nothing higher than a 5. So if a plant does well in a zone 7 and you see that on the plant tag, just remember that it may not do well here. So once we've talked about zones, the next thing on the list is soils. And wow, I mean, what to say? I think that most people in Central Oregon would agree that our native soil is extremely challenging. Most native soils are coarse, they're predominantly sandy. We live in a massive volcano field, so the soil tends to be sterile with very minimal organic matter. So what do? We have to amend. Many of you have compost heaps. Many of you just buy commercial amendments because you must amend with some organic material or aged manure, and be careful with that and make sure that you know the source of that, because the amendments create an environment where the roots will grow and plants will thrive. Soil amendments also help the soil to accept and store water. And because of the sterile nature of our soil, we have to help create that healthy environment. And this healthy soil should provide nutrients. It should help provide aeration, and it should also help the water go into the soil instead of running off. But there is a rule of thumb and a ratio. You don't want to put plants 100% into amended soil, because once they reach our native soil, they're going to freak out and say, I don't want any of that. So it's 1/3 amendment to 2/3 native soil. And what that does is that allows the plants to acclimate to our native soil gradually. So you're giving them a warm, wonderful initial start, and you're gradually introducing them to the native soil, that once they hit the native soil, they say, I'm okay with this and I can live with this. And they will eventually be very well acclimated and able to grow. So let's say you live in an area where there's just too much rock and you cannot even dig down 3 inches or 4 inches at all to even create any kind of a soil environment to put plants in. Well, another option is raised beds and containers. And with both of those, that you can control the soil mix. There are some limitations in what you can grow, that's true, but they all also extend the growing season. So if you're interested in growing vegetables, these are both great options. But you can use them for annuals, some perennials, and vegetables. So for more information on raised bed vegetable gardening, there are 2 vegetable sessions that are going on. Next Saturday in the morning is the session on can you really grow vegetables in Central Oregon with Ashley Joyce. And then on the 15th, we've got raised bed vegetable gardening and irrigation systems in the morning by Master Gardener Vickie Kemp. And I will get to we also have a container gardening session, and I'm going to have a slide on that in just a moment. Okay, next factors. 2 key factors, elevation and temperature. And these really impact on our growing season. And because of the geography of our area, I already talked about this, we grow in elevation as we go south. So areas like Lapine and Sun River have longer and colder winters, and they have lower night temperatures, especially during the growing season, and they have intense sunlight year round. So you look at this, bend the average length of the growing season 90 to 100 days. But look at Lapine and Sun River, 70 to 80 days. That is incredibly short. But then you've also got Warm Springs and Madras, where they're into the triple digits there for their growing seasons. So many people will use season extenders like row cover cloches, walls of water, and greenhouses. And I have a couple of slides on those. So the temperature, I mean, it gets to be a pretty interesting situation because our temperatures have also fluctuated a lot in the last few summers. And we've had heat domes, and it's too soon to know if this is going to be a long-term trend. So another factor, remember, I'm giving you building blocks here, and it might seem like, oh my gosh, this is so much information. How am I ever going to process it? Well, you can, and you will, And we are here to help you with that. Well, because of where we are, we can have frost any time of the year. And there's been a lot of science and historical records reviewed, and these 9 dates seem to be the 9 dates where we have the least likely chance of having a frost, which means that we can have frost any other day. From July 15th through August 19th, look at these dates. It's just, it's like, holy moly's. And many people move here because they love the sunlight. When we came back to Oregon, I told my husband I didn't want to live in Portland because it was just too cloudy and rainy, and I wanted to live where there was a sun. But the sunny days that we get here are also the things that are responsible for what's called radiational cooling, which means that we can get frost any time of the year. And why am I telling you this? Because temperature affects maturity rates and how plants grow. And it's not uncommon that fluctuations can cause plants to bud out and begin to grow early in the spring, only to be damaged by frost later on. And then factor into the fact that we've had heat domes the last couple of summers, where the daytime temperatures exceeded 95 degrees, and then the nighttime temperatures dropped to 30 or 40 degrees. So it was just a huge drop. That has a direct impact on our growing season. So this is how I felt today. I really wanted to garden. And then I thought back to last year. May 8th was Mother's Day. You would think you should be able to put your hands in the dirt and start getting stuff ready to go in. And no, we got snow last year on Mother's Day. And I put this in here because I have to caution you and I urge you, you have to be patient. And for me, that's really, really hard, but you've got to be patient because of the temperatures. And now I want to give you the science. Temperature is a critical factor and a challenge because of the large swings. And even though water can freeze at 32 degrees, established plant material will do okay, but they'll start suffering frost damage at 24 degrees or below. And look at this temperature range for optimal plant growth. It's between 50 and 90 degrees. And if it goes below 50 degrees, growth slows down. And when it's above that, it grows. So if you lived someplace else where it was really constantly warm and you were growing anything in the summertime, you could get up one day and you would see your plant at one level. And literally the next day, it looked like it had grown like 5, 6, 7 inches. And that warmth is what allows roots to grow and the plants to thrive. Newer and tender plants can freeze if the temperature drops below 32. So what do? You want to protect new plantings with row cover. That's perennials and shrubs as well as vegetables. And where do you buy row cover? Well, you can get that at the OSU Extension office located at the fairgrounds. It's great material and it will last many, many seasons. And what do you do if you don't protect your plants? And sometimes you just can't. This is a honey locust that was damaged because of frost. And if you look at these brown leaves and you didn't pay attention to what was going on with the weather, you might think that this is some sort of a disease that's happening with this plant and this tree. And it's not, it's frost damage. And it's just heartbreaking to see it, but it happens. This is pumpkin. And again, look at the leaves, they're black. And you think, oh my heavens, something is attacking my plants. And that's true. It's the weather that's attacking the plants. And then this is what happened on Mother's Day. Many people had fruit trees, ornamental fruit trees, production fruit trees, just getting ready to blossom on Mother's Day last year. And then we got that snow and we got really, really badly cold temperatures. And so the blossoms were injured by that frost. I have an ornamental pear tree in my front yard that I'm looking at right now, and it's already starting to show some buds. And last year with that Mother's Day snow and the frost, my tree was getting ready to go into blossom. And with that snow and frost, killed them all. And all it did was leaf straight out. And it was just heartbreaking. And we see in the plant clinic, people will call and they are upset and they're concerned because they're not getting fruit sets and they're not getting blossoms on their trees. And it may have everything to do with a weather event that occurred weeks before. Not always, but a lot of times it is the weather. So here's winter injury. And look, the tree on the left is an established tree. And that whole left side of that poor tree is just really not doing very well because of the weather. And the tree on the right, it just got slammed by the snow. And, you know, many times these trees will survive, but boy, it's emotionally hard to see them when they are like this and they're just being pummeled by the weather. So, okay, we've talked about cold, but we've had summers that have been hot. And it's just the complete opposite in the form of heat domes. And I heard a news report on the radio this week that the 2021 Central Oregon summer was one of the hottest summers on record. And it had some of the hottest summer days on record. And that's important because all plants, including our native plants, are going to suffer through prolonged stretches of heat. The natives are just not used to that. So these are some of the examples of what happens with heat. Leaves will roll and cup, and you might think there's some sort of an infestation, when in fact it's the heat that's causing it. And why do they do that? They are responding to the heat to reduce moisture loss in the plant, and that's why they will roll and cup. Plants will wilt in the hottest part of the day, and then in the evening when the temperatures drop and it gets cooler, and in the morning they are doing better. But it's likely that wilting is stress from the heat. Blossom and fruit drop, same as with frost. The heat can also cause blossom and fruit drop because plants will drop their buds and flowers after prolonged high temperatures because they're trying to conserve their resources so they can survive. This is really common in certain vegetables like peppers, squash, and cucumbers, especially if temperatures persist. And who hasn't tried to grow parsley or cilantro and have heat come and those bolt? They go to seed and it's premature flowering and before you could harvest. And high temperatures induce the bolting in cool season vegetables, and it could be the end. Things like spinach or cold weather crops, they just don't do well in the heat at all. Sun scald. If you've grown apples or if you've ever grown tomatoes, and I didn't really realize this until I came to Central Oregon, that these fruit can get sunburned just like people. And it shows primarily on the side of the fruit most exposed to the sun. And it can look different depending on what the fruit type and vegetable is. It could look watery on the fruit. It could be discolored. It could blister on the skin. It could dry it out. It could be sunken, or it could have hardened areas on the fruit surface. And then who hasn't grown a tomato where there's been some blossom and rot? And it's a very common problem with tomatoes, but it becomes very problematic when sun scald is present. So proper watering helps to minimize that. And you want to make sure you don't let the plants dry out. So what else can you do to reduce heat stress? Well, like frost protection, there are things you can do to ease the heat. Watering, I'm going to talk about water in just a minute, but I want to just briefly go over this because there are varying recommendations on the ideal time of watering. And many times people ask, should I water in the morning? Should I water at night? What should I do? The key is deep watering is preferred over shallow watering. Mature trees can suffer from heat and drought stress just like smaller plants, and they won't show the symptoms until much later. So watering is important. Mulch helps to conserve moisture. Shade can be important if you're container gardening. But be aware that if you shade your plants 24/7, they might want to reach for the sun and they'll stretch for it. But in the hot part of the day, you want to be able to provide some shade. Don't plant, transplant, or prune in high heat. Wait. The plants are already in shock from the abnormal high temperatures. And the same's true for fertilizing. Every chemical will tell you on its label what the temperature range is for proper application. So I stress again, read the label, read the label. Wait to fertilize until it's cooler because you don't really need new growth when it's blasting hot. And if you apply the chemicals, you can damage the plants when it's too hot. The one thing you can do and you should do is weed. Weeds are opportunists. And I don't know how they do. They manage to thrive and survive in the most horrible situations and environments. And when they do, they are competing with our landscape plants for nutrients and water. So another session, great session coming up that you can learn about the weeds in our area and register for that session with Master Gardener. It's on April 15th at 1 with Master Gardener and former OSU Extension instructor, Tony Stefan. She knows her weeds and she will be able to give you all kinds of great information about how you can handle that. There's also this resource on this slide. And again, you're going to get all of these after this is over. So one quick picture about what some leaf scorch and drought stress looks like, because this is really common. I see this a lot on aspens because of the sunburn. And then when the hosta is really in serious trouble, they like shade, and if they don't get enough water, they've got this horrible crinkling that's going on, and people might think there's some sort of a disease going on, but it's really about the lack of water. So since we're talking about water, let's move on to our precipitation. Give me just a second. I need a little sip of water. Pardon the pun. So even if you've lived here only a short time, I'm pretty sure you've figured out that we do not get a lot of water during the growing season. And you can look at this. This is from last year. And those 6.07, 8.48, and 6.47 inches, those numbers are over a 6-month period of time. You can do the math. That's not a lot of water. Most of our precipitation comes in the form of snow, like today. I have snow at my house, but even that has fluctuated in the last few years. And this information is updated from the from the U.S. Climate Data and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And the bottom line is this is simply not enough precipitation for us to really be comfortable in thinking that we have enough water to grow during the summer. Our snowpack is an important resource, but our drought situation has been critical for so long, it's not showing any signs of improving. And here's the contradiction. This is as of yesterday. This is our snowpack. And this made the front page of the Bend newspaper this morning. We're at 137% of normal in Upper Deschutes and Crooked, the area. Well, we're still in a drought because we need years of that kind of level. And this is April 1st. And we have not had this kind of snowpack for a number of years. And what is really telling is you have to take the snowpack levels and look at them in conjunction with our reservoir levels. And these are our reservoir levels as of Thursday. And this is really revealing. Because even though Wiki Up is 66% full, I want to stress they're only 66% full on the 30th of March. Prineville only at 19%. It is painful to see this because most of our key reservoirs are close to being empty. And you have to keep it in context. And this is not a good sign for the summer. And we are still in a drought crisis. This was the top was the headline that was published in the Bend Bulletin in February. The bottom one was published in March. And as of March, the governor officially declared a drought emergency in all 3 Oregon counties. And it seems like such a contradiction because there's been so much precipitation south of us. Poor California, they're either drowning or buried in yards and yards and yards deep of snow. But those systems have largely bypassed us. Now, today, we're supposed to be getting a really good dump in the higher elevations and in the mountains. And I'm hoping that that really does happen. But Deschutes County is in a historic 4th year of declared drought. So this is all doomsday stuff, it sounds like. Well, yes and no. It is very serious. It is not a good situation. Our climate and our weather is in flux. And what we've seen the last few years is that we need to get new skills on gardening in drought conditions and in gardening during a drought. So just to bring this home, this is the drought map as of the 28th of March. So we're still in a serious situation, but we can switch gears and we can take all this into account in our own landscapes. So how do you garden during a drought? Well, one thing you need to do is you need to pay attention to the weather and the weather where you are. And I did a session, a short session last year on this, a similar topic, and people weren't really sure where their weather reports came from. And so I thought that this would be good information to share with people because we're such a large geographic area. Weather reports where we are come from different sources, and the weather report could be miles from your house. So for instance, I live in Northwest Bend by Shevlin Park. The official weather station for my area is the Bend Airport, which is miles and miles and miles and miles away from my house. So that's not necessarily the best weather source for me. In Lapine, for most of Bend, it's the Bend Airport. In Lapine, most of the weather reporting is from Wiki Up Reservoir. Redmond, it's the Redmond Airport. Madras is the airport and the ag station. Sisters can get their weather reports from a variety of areas: Redmond, Bend, Camp Sherman, Haystack, or even Pendleton. But I've given you a link here at the bottom for Weather Underground because they have locations in a lot of neighborhoods throughout our region, and many of them might be much closer to where you are. I use one that is in Aubrey Butte, which is a mile from my house. So it's a much more appropriate weather predictor station for me than the Bend Airport. So know your weather forecast before you plant, transplant, spray. Then embrace the fact that we all have microclimates in our lands. You can plant different things in the front of your house than in the back of your house, or even in little pockets in those areas. And drought conditions will need special attention. Here are some great resources for gardening during a drought, because you can grow vegetables in Central Oregon, and this publication that we have been using for a number of years is very popular, and it has good information about how to do that. Keeping plants alive under drought or water restrictions is also a wonderful resource. And when you can embrace these things and how you can establish drought-tolerant plants and tips for vegetable gardening during a drought, you can garden, and you can do it and still be a responsible steward of our water resources. So I want to go ahead and continuing with this little water theme that I'm on. Not too much longer, but water's becoming an endangered resource everywhere in the West. And I don't know that you can pick up a paper or hear a news report when you don't hear something about restrictions going in place, that they want to start seeding clouds and they don't know what they're going to do. And areas, all states in the West, it's not just us, but it's everywhere in the West. And so here's the question: what can we do as concerned and responsible gardeners? Well, there are a lot of things that we can do. We can start to explore more water-wise gardens and using natives. There's a session on the natives this afternoon. Many people are planting more drought-tolerant shrubs, trees, natives, grasses, and perennials. You can collect rainwater. You can use rain chains. I have rain chains on my house, and it's a huge help because the water that comes down them, and many of you may have them, it goes into my perennial beds instead of running off. So that's a great way to conserve water. Permeable pathways. Some people want to, what does that mean? Well, it allows the water to get into your landscape instead of running off. You can also have dry riverbeds or bioswales, which are, they appear like, they allow runoff to go to the garden and not to the street. And it can also appear like a creek bed with the permeable pavers. So it can add texture and interest to your landscape while also doing something that is very constructive and good. There's an OSU publication on water-wise gardening in Central Oregon that is very, very helpful. And there's a link to that at the end. And I would also encourage you, if you've never been to the water-wise demonstration garden at Holland's Head Park in Northeast Bend, that is a wonderful, very instructive and educational garden that has plants that are proven to do well here in drought conditions. And also, we have a new demo garden now on the south side of town at Alpenglow, and that's near Caldera, the new Caldera High School. And they're doing some wonderful and new things down there. So if you're out and about, try and catch those demo gardens, because being able to see it in the ground, really truly growing here, makes all the difference in the world. So what else can we do? Irrigation. The thing is how much do you need and what's the cost? So you really need to plan well. There are all kinds of automatic systems available now, and many municipalities have special deals with their water departments. They'll come out and they will help you. They will review things. They want you to also conserve water. And it is absolutely conceivable that you would have to combine automatic with manual irrigation, because it depends on what your landscape is like. But what you want to avoid are sprinklers that throw water into the air, because wind will make it evaporate and it's not going to get to the plants. And if you have an automatic system, you want to avoid the set it and forget it syndrome, because as you know, our summers change. They vary. Water needs vary. So you still need to adjust the volume and timing based on the season and the plant's needs. So you want to water deeply. I mentioned this a couple of slides ago. You want to get down, you want to water 8 to 16 inches down and less often. So how do you know if you're getting down deep enough? Well, you can stick your finger in the ground. You can stick something in the ground that will show whether it's moist. And you want to get the water to the root system. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to overwater. And some people would think that because we're in the high desert and it's so dry, more is better. And in that instance, that's not true, because too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing. And your plants can wilt, and you might think that it's heat or something else when the culprit is in fact too much water, and it can cause root rot. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're giving your plants enough. And you want to avoid getting the foliage wet because many plants don't like that. So if you're going to water and you can't avoid getting the foliage wet, you want to water in the morning because then that allows the foliage to dry throughout the day. And there's usually less wind in the morning as well. You want to water about 1 to 2 times per week for new plants. And then once they're established, not as much. You want to make sure it goes down deeply. You want to encourage deep rooting. And I added this slide last week because I participated in this webinar that the city of Bend had put on. And I had always wondered what was the water use and the water need for certain types of plant materials. And I thought this was very informational. And lawns have a wonderful purpose in fire-prone areas because they serve as fire breaks, but you can see that in the watering hierarchy, they are the ones that need the most water, lawns. Vegetables need more water than established perennials, natives and drought-tolerant trees and shrubs. And this is just good info to have, that you can see that the high desert native plants don't use nearly as much water as lawn and landscape would use. So I'm giving you this information as just as an example, and this is directly from the city of Bend. So when you are watering, and especially your trees, you want to water at the drip line. I see so many people in my neighborhood that have tubing around the trunk of the tree, and they're watering there. And the thing is that's not where the tree needs the water, because the root systems branch out. And as it branches out, the newer feeder roots are where the water needs to go. So if you're watering at the trunk, you're not getting the plant the water that it needs. And don't forget winter watering. I've done this already twice this winter, even though I've got snow now. A lot of people don't realize they should do this here. And so it's overlooked. It's critical for trees and shrubs, especially those that are not fully established. If we've gone for weeks and weeks without any kind of precipitation, snow doesn't necessarily water the trees. If the ground is frozen, there isn't anything getting to the roots. But we've had several days in January and February where we had warm days and the ground was warm enough to accept water. Now, it may not be practical for you to do this if you have acreage, but where you can and where you have new plant material, you want to go ahead and try to do winter watering. I use a 5-gallon paint bucket that my husband drilled a bunch of holes in, and I just move it around the drip line, and I make sure I give my trees 15 to 20 gallons of water every 6 or 8 weeks. Okay, so let's move on to season extenders. I said we would do this, and here we are. So this is how you can get a little more time out of the growing season, is that you can greenhouses, cold frames, cloches, row cover, and walls of water. So what exactly are those? Well, this is a really nice, quick graphic on how to figure out where to put a greenhouse. And I want to show you this because it's a really easy graphic to see that it's a good location, and you have to track where how the sun moves and where your light is. If you want more information on greenhouses, please register for the session on April 22nd at 10. Amy Jo Detweiler, who is our professor and horticulturist at OSU Extension in Redmond, is the person who is presenting that. She knows her stuff. She is awesome when she presents, and I am sure that she would be able to answer all of your questions. Another thing you can do is build a cloche. And this is an example of people doing that. And the link is actually a publication that gives you a step-by-step guide on how to put one together. And then this is an example. This is at the Discovery Park Community Garden, where they have put up an adaptation. These are all cloches, but they had a huge problem with the critters when the garden was first moved from its old location down to next to the dog park. And so they experimented for a few years, and they finally arrived at a pretty successful configuration for a cloche. The thing here is if you use plastic, make sure that you roll it up and give the cloche opportunities for air circulation. It takes time and it's a commitment, but it's really important. Frost protection. These are all examples of frost protection. This is the row cover. The white stuff is the row cover I was referring to earlier. You can use it in ground beds. You can use it wrapped around pots, which is what I do because all of my herbs and what few vegetables I do grow are all in whiskey barrels. So I wrap the barrels. Or you can take it when you know that frost is going to be predicted because you have gone on those links that I gave you and you know your weather report and you know that frost is coming. However you cover your plants to protect them will help them. If you are a tomato lover, and I've actually used these for peppers, these are walls of water. And the way they work is you fill the little tubes up with water, and then the water actually absorbs the heat of the day and then acts as an insulator for the plant. And some people just leave them on for the entire growing season, even though the tomatoes then grow out and much taller than they are, but they still provide a measure of protection. I wanted to then raise this because I have seen this many places in our area where people are using old tires and because they have them and they're easy and convenient. But I want to stress that it's really not encouraged because rubber tires contain all kinds of bad actors that can leach into the soil and also leach into your vegetables that you're growing. And I don't think it's a good idea for you to want to imbibe that. So once you have gone through all of those factors, how many of you, I wish I could see a show of hands right now, how many of you have had this happen to you, where you have gotten your plant and you've taken all the factors into account, and now you're ready to actually start putting stuff in the ground? And it can be tricky. And I don't know about you, but I don't have the back to be able to move all of the lava rock in my yard. So it's not a realistic option, which is why I do most of my gardening in whiskey barrels. So you want to make sure you have a location that will work. So how exactly do you figure that out? What do you plant? So before you buy, you want to consider what the mature size of the plant is going to be. Look at the tree in the middle picture. When that tree was planted, I'm pretty sure those people didn't realize that it was going to get that big. So you really need to look at that. Think Goldilocks. Is it too big, too small, or just right? Where will it go? And is it in the right place? Why that plant? For fall color, pollinators, shade, fragrance, or to provide edible fruit? Buy a quality and plant that's healthy and free from disease, and make sure that it can grow here and that it's not invasive. So you want to choose plants that are appropriate for our region and our hardiness zone. And will they work in your landscape where you want to put them? The plant on the left is a Mount Atlas daisy, and it grows really well in the sun, and it's considered a water-wise plant. The plant on the right is a bellflower, and it grows best in part shade, and it provides gorgeous color, and it is a really nice ground cover. If you're trying to bring in plants from your old neighborhood, someplace back east or in another area of the country, make sure it's not invasive, because what could be a wonderful plant from your old neighborhood might be invasive here. There is a link to the list of invasive plants at the end of the presentation. And if you don't have the space to plant in the ground, do like I do, plant in containers. And if that's an option for you, register for the container gardening session we have going with Master Gardener Joanne Abbott on April 8th at 1. She's got a great presentation for you, and you will learn a lot. Then also consider going native. Again, we've got a native plant class going on at 1 o'clock today. Choose plants where the natural habitat is similar to the conditions in your landscape. Just because you see it and you love it and it looks great, you still have to think, is that going to grow in my yard at my house? So this link that I have on this slide includes trees, shrubs, grasses, and perennials that focus on native plants that are readily available from local nurseries here and adapt easily to our urban landscape environment. Information can also be found in Central Oregon's Plant Resource Guide, and the link to that is at the end. And you can't go wrong. So to encourage you, I wanted to show you this picture. This is actually from the Redmond Demo Garden, and this was taken in August. And you can see just nestled in the middle, the walls of water that are there. And this is a great example of mixed planting. We have got annuals mixed in with vegetables here because it'll attract the pollinators. And it's just such a lovely example of what you can do in a small area. And it's so much color and wonderful stuff. Okay, we are coming down the home stretch here. Once you've decided what plants you want to put in your landscape, how do you actually get them in the ground so they'll thrive? Well, this is another step that I want to put in the front of your head, because we often don't remember to do this. We want to go to the nursery, we get the plants, they're in pots, we stick them right in the ground. And we forget that many of those plants may have been started and raised in greenhouses, and they haven't yet been really exposed to the temperature changes. And this rhododendron was one of those plants. It was just planted without letting it acclimate to the temperature swings. So how do you do that? Well, you do it slowly. You leave them out for a little bit, then you put them in a covered place or in a garage. Then you keep extending the amount of time that they're outside so that over a 2 to 3 week period, they finally are ready to go in the ground. And if you're buying trees, you want to make sure that the tree can survive here. And you don't want to wait too long, because you really want to get them in the ground by the early fall so that they have time to acclimate totally before the winter sets in. And then once you've done that and you're ready to transplant, you really need to do that properly as well. The tree on the right, the poor thing, it did not have its roots loosened before planting, and it was planted too deep. You can see that color. Here's this color right here on the stem, because it was the soil was way up, way over where it should have been. And this tree, especially trees, they will come wrapped in burlap, they will come wrapped in twine. And this tree on the left didn't have the twine cut, and it was planted well above the flare. And that's where the tree actually flares out to the roots. And you don't ever want to cover that up with soil, and you want to remove the twine and any burlap. And the reason for that, again, goes back to our soils. Our soils are sterile. There's just not any microorganisms in them that will break down those elements, the burlap and the twine, where, in other places in the country, it's just not a big deal. But here, you really need to give the trees a chance to grow. And different plants will require different techniques, so pay attention. Amend the soil if you need to, dig a proper hole, and don't cover that flare up. Water the plant thoroughly before you start. And is it hardened off? Hardened off is acclimating it. That is getting it outside and getting it used to the changes in the temperature. Amend the soil. And remember what I said about the heat is you didn't want to transplant on a really hot day. Well, you want to make sure it's a cloudy day or late afternoon, not horribly hot. You don't want transplanting is a shock enough. So you want to give the plant that you're putting in the ground its best chance to survive. Give the roots a nice, gentle massage. Let them go free so that they can grow into that soil. And again, the soil around the trees should only be up to the flare. All right, now we are on the home stretch here. Internet searches. I know many of you are really computer savvy, and you'll just jump on the internet and you'll start doing some research. And I wanted to share with you that there's some, many universities have horticulture departments, but OSU, UC Davis, I know it's California, but they have a great horticulture program. And Colorado have great university resources that are very, very applicable here. There are also some Android and iOS apps that you can download. I've got a bunch of plant doctor apps from Purdue. And the thing about the universities having the apps is that they keep them up to date. And OSU, Oregon State, has incredible resources at their site. And this new WaterWise web-based app is so much fun to use. You just follow the link and go straight to the plant list, and you can sort it and filter by water use, height, attributes, all kinds of things. And again, you're going to get all of these links, so you don't need to scribble them down. The Extension Office is a wonderful resource for you. They are open all during the year, but especially during the growing season, 8 to 5. This is the website for them. They have all kinds of free publications that you can download. They have a free plant clinic. And when you click on this home garden and landscape link, this is what it will get to you, that you can get to all the gardening publications, and you can also get to the High Desert Gardening newsletter. And the newsletter, that's really valuable because that comes out 5 times a year. You can sign up once with a one-time electronic fee, and it's very low. I'm not sure. I think it might be $5 or something. And when you do that, you get this in this newsletter. And what great tips. These are all the things that you need to know now, because we are now officially in April. And it will tell you what you need to do in the landscape. It will tell you what you need to do when you're starting your vegetables. And then the same for May. So if you haven't seen this, it is totally worth getting, and it just comes to you in your email. So I want to recap. Elements to successful gardening in Central Oregon. Yes, you can do it. I am living proof of that. Know your zone. Yes, we're supposed to be a USDA zone 6, but garden for something lower. Understand the temperature fluctuations, because heat and cold both will impact your plants. They impact me. So, I don't like it when it's really hot or really cold. I like it sort of in the middle. Plan for your water needs and be realistic about precipitation levels. Amend your soil. We do have pests, but you want to manage them thoughtfully. Using chemicals can have residual effects on non-intended targets like pets and raptors and things like that. So be thoughtful about it. Plant the right plants for our region in the right place for your landscape. Season extenders. Row cover is available at the Extension Office. And if you need soil thermometers, those are also available at the Extension Office. And that is probably the best way to know what your soil temperature is, especially when you're going to be growing vegetables, or if you're going to be doing winter watering of your plants, your trees. Walls, water, greenhouses. Water during the winter. So important. Mulch. Put the right plant in the right place, protect your plants from the wind, and whatever the seed packet says for days to maturity, you need to add 14 more days to that number because of the temperature swings. All right, here are the links, and these are the things that you're going to get in the email. This isn't everything. These are the key things that I used in creating this presentation for you today. So I wanted to share them with you. All of these will be emailed to you after the session. And common weeds, this is really good because it shows you what they look like. Native plants for landscapes. Many of these have pictures with them, which I find to be very helpful. Then, of course, the vegetables, harvesting rainwater for use in the garden, all kinds of information about invasive and noxious plants, which you do want to know. And then the signs of deer damage is a really helpful site because it asks you what you're seeing, and it will show you what specific kinds of damage looks like, whether it's deer or elk specifically. And that is really, really helpful. Then the drought links. I mentioned these before, but since we are still in a prolonged drought, you can garden in a drought. You just have to be thoughtful about it. And we all need to learn different skills for our gardening in order to be good water stewards. And if you use these resources, and if you do that, this is going to be you, that when your flowers start blooming, you are just going to absolutely love it, because you will have put all of these tools together that I've given you today. So I want to leave you with my mantra, because since I have learned to garden here, I really believe this. And I think that if you take these tools that I've given you today, then you are going to have this superpower, and it's going to be all of you. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to go back to my video. And I am going to take whatever questions haven't been answered.
Okay. Oops, my screen is moving around. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I'm just going to say, stick around for questions. I know some people drop off early, and I just wanted to remind you that we'll send you the video and the link, all the Vickie's links, and that there is a very short, like a 3 or maybe 3 question survey when you log off, and we appreciate if you would just take a moment to fill that out. So the questions, you must have done a great job, because there aren't a lot of questions here. And I got to say that this is my 4th or 5th year as a master gardener, and I learn things every time I listen to you. So thank you. There were a couple of questions, of course, first about deer, because that's what you were talking about first. First one is a 6-foot high fence really high enough for a small garden?
For deer, yes. For elk, no, because elk are much bigger. But for most deer, the answer to that is pretty. I have a 6-foot fence, a cyclone fence across the back of my yard, and they come up to that fence all the time. And in 10 years, a couple of them have tried, but they've never successfully jumped it, because they just can't get that high. The elk, on the other hand, I mean, if you live in an area where there are a lot of elk, you might want to look at something a little bit higher.
Thank you. And regarding the deer also, Diane is asking if there was a recommended hedge for a double fence, like preferably native or deer resistant.
Well, that's something where I think if you go to the Waterwise gardening brochure, if you go to the native plant resource that I listed, there will be things there that people can look at. Right off the top of my head, my brain is just zoned, so I don't have a specific recommendation. It depends on where you are, what your landscape is, how much light you have. What I do know is that there are some hedges that will grow that you can put at 3 feet high. And if you put them 3 to 4 feet apart for the double hedge, they really do work, because the deer can't see where to land and they won't jump them.
Also,
Those are the resources.
I've watched a deer in my neighborhood, and they jump straight up. I mean, they don't go like a dog or a horse that would go over fences. They like go straight up and straight down.
And if they can't see a safe landing spot, they just don't go there, because their eyesight's okay, but it's not great.
Thank you. Couple of things questions on amendments. One is, where is a good place to buy an organic amendment for a vegetable garden?
Well, there's a link. There's a publication for nurseries, and any of the nurseries in our area, I would check them out. And there is actually a publication link on nurseries in Central Oregon that you can check out that lists a lot of the places that you can go to, but I would just visit. We don't really give specific recommendations for where you can buy, because we don't want to do that. But there are all kinds of nurseries around, and I'm sure that any one of them would be able to help you.
Thank you. And along that same vein is an anonymous person is asking, do you have any concerns about the bulk compost available at several places in Redmond and elsewhere?
Well, this is interesting. The topic briefly came up during the new training session about compost, because many of the landfills, like Redmond and Deschutes County, the landfill down on the south side of town here, are selling compost. And many people have used them without problems. And if you have issues or concerns, I mean, those are all hot compost. And I'm pretty sure that those get to such a high temperature that anything that would be not good is pretty much killed off by the temperatures. But do your due diligence. And if you have any concerns at all, use another source, but a lot of people use them with success.
Thank you. Along the same line, do you have resources to obtain good manure?
No, I don't. What I do want to say is that if you are getting manure, make sure that you know where the source was, so that you know if it was cows or horses where they were grazing, and that they were not grazing on any kind of pasture that might have been chemically treated, because that can pass through to their manure, and those chemicals can stay in the manure for a longer period of time than you would expect. And it can cause vegetables and things like that to grow really awfully. And you want to make sure that your manure is really clear of that. And again, any of the nurseries would be able to direct you. But if you're buying from a private person or just off the side of the road, just be very, very careful about where it came from.
Thank you. Crystal has a question. I moved from the Oregon Valley and have some daffodils already in a plant box. How can I help make sure they bloom? Do I need a frost blanket or row cover?
No, actually, I've got daffodils in my whiskey barrels, and I have never done anything with them. I just let them go. I don't water them, because if you think about when you plant those bulbs, you don't water them during the winter, and they are designed to survive in that cold. And once they start peeking their heads up, if we're going to have a frost and they're getting ready to bloom, I don't even think I've covered them in, because daffodils are the true cold warriors. Mm-hmm. They are awesome. And so, no, you don't need to do anything with that. If you have tender other new stuff like pansies that you're putting in, well, I would probably protect them. But no, the daffodils, they're my heroes. They're great.
Yeah, but my only thing about daffodils, they don't come up for a long time here, but May or June. Yeah.
It depends. Well, it depends on the sun and the heat in the soil.
That's true. My house is later. So
yeah.
Thank you. Rebecca would like to know, did you acquire whiskey barrels? Do you use them for vegetables?
The answer is yes, I do use them for, I grow mostly herbs and things like jalapeno and serrano peppers, because and I support my local farmers markets with the other vegetables. But you can get whiskey barrels in a lot of different places, and just, hunt around. You can get them in plastic materials. You can actually buy the wooden ones. You can go and a lot of people have them, and wherever you can source them. I think, I got mine at a box store, and they're fine. I've had them for years, and they do just great.
I've seen some of the breweries around here also. Sometimes they'll auction them off when they have them.
And for me, they're great. They're a great size. And for those of you who are thinking about this, I got 5-wheel dollies to put mine on that are heavy duty 500-pound worthy dollies, because they will roll over the gravel that I have, and I can move them if I need to. I have several that are stationary that I don't move, but the rest of them I do move around, and I got the dollies to do that. And here I am, I'm this little gal, and I'm out moving my whiskey barrels, and works like a charm.
That's great. Thank you. Another person would like to know if you have any recommendations for plants that grow under and around mature juniper trees.
Good question. The Waterwise Gardening book has a great section on plants that grow well in shade. And I think that take a look at those. You want ground covers. There are several things that you might consider. And it's going to also come down to what kind of soil you have there. And are those junipers providing a lot of shade? Do you have irrigation there or not? Is it out someplace? Check out that guide. That is a great place for you to start, because there are some things that you can plant, but it's going to depend on what the specifics are on your landscape.
Thank you. And that's a good thing to call Plant Connect too when we start talking about that, if they have all the resources there. Kim has a question. What plant stores would you recommend that don't sell Monsanto-based plants?
I honestly do not have an answer to that question. I have never researched that, and even if I had, I still would. I honestly don't know. So I'm sorry that's one question I can't answer for you.
I guess call the nurseries.
Yeah.
Okay, and what we were just saying, Laura would like to know, can you tell us more about the extension office? Do they have items for purchase? Can people there answer questions?
Well, the extension office is your hero resource. They are open 8 to 5. They have all kinds of free resources. There is a plant clinic there, and the plant clinic location and the phone numbers are all in the resources that you're going to get emailed to you. There are master gardeners that work the plant clinic during the growing season, and it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can also buy the row cover at the OSU Extension office, which is at the fairgrounds, and you can buy soil thermometers there as well. But if you have questions about what to plant, if you've got issues with plants that you already have that you're not sure what's going on with them, if you have insect issues, deer issues, you're not sure what to do, call the plant clinic office and ask to speak to a master gardener, and somebody will be there to help you. I mean, it is an amazing resource for the Tri-County area. And I have to say, I'm a little partial because I think that our plant clinic office does a wonderful job with our gardening community because we're there for you. So 8 to 5, Monday through Friday.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephanie would like to know regarding the hardware material and the wire mesh to keep rodents out. What size holes do you recommend?
Well, it's smaller is better. When you saw on that one slide for the Discovery Park, or what the old Northwest Crossing Community Garden with the wire fencing, those holes were really big. I mean, they were probably 4 or 5 inches square, and small. Small. You need small because chipmunks can get through a lot of small areas. They're like little striped mice. And the mice can do that too. So the smaller, the better. And there are, again, any of the ranching stores will have all kinds of good materials that you can use for your garden. So places like Coastal or Wilco or anything like that, because they are used to dealing with the farmers and the ranchers, and you've got those resources. So smaller is better.
Yeah, there is hardware cloth that they call, which is just practically impermeable.
Right.
But it's really hard to work with also. Okay, question for another anonymous. Do you know Oregon's law or rule on water collection?
Well, actually, I did look this up during our training session with the new Master Gardener class. And you are allowed to collect rainwater. And if you go online and simply Google Oregon rainwater collection laws, you will get a wealth of information, because some people seem to think that it was an illegal act for you to collect your own rainwater. And that is not the case. And the city of Bend actually has a publication about collecting rainwater and creating rain gardens and using that water collection as water conservation efforts. There's just a ton of information out there, but I can tell you it is not illegal for you to collect your rainwater. That I can say for certain.
Thank you very much. Jennifer would like to know, she says, I have had the town deer eat my onions. The HOA restricts fences. I hate to spray. Will the electronic things help me?
I'm not sure what electronic things we're talking about.
I'm not sure about for deer. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know some people use some things in their raised beds to try and keep the critters out, but my advice to you is use whatever you think is going to work. And if you don't want to use spray, and your HOA, and many HOAs will not allow the fences, the worst that can happen is that you tried it and it didn't work. I have no experience with the electronic things, so I can't really speak to that. but I do know some people who have tried them and it's mixed results. So give it a shot.
I've heard people using have a timer so that a motion sensor timer so water goes off and sprays when they
Right.
come in. And I think the interesting thing is that the deer aren't supposed to like onions because they're smelly, but that just goes to show you that
They will eat anything if they're
the fawns
served to
don't
them.
know. Yeah.
They'll eat anything.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Vicki. Stephanie asks, I'm also having trouble with my worm compost and freezing temperatures. How can I get it before the worms die? Or do they hibernate? Should I expect them to revive? Should I do more insulation around the bin? Should I keep it inside?
Oh my heavens. Well, the one person who's on this who would have the best answer would be Rocky. And she is, I'm not sure
I wonder if we could pull her up. She might.
Well, is she still on and can you let her talk?
I think so. Let's
Because
see.
this gal who is another master gardener, who's one of your attendees,
Hi, Rocky.
she was a worm composter. And sorry, Rock, to do this to you, but you actually would be able to answer this question when I have zero knowledge of worm composting. She's muted.
Can you unmute, Rock? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay. As far as the worms freezing, I'm not sure that these worms are inside or outside. If the worms are outside, it would be good if they were in an area that had no bottom so that the worms could go into the soil, then they would not freeze. If they're restricted in a bin outside, then yes, they will freeze. But it's been known that worms will freeze and then come back after they've frozen. So it's not but if they're allowed to freeze and thaw and freeze and thaw, then yes, they will die. So it's a good idea to not let the worms outside if we're having freezing temperatures. And worms do not hibernate.
Part of the question is, could she put insulation around the bin if it was outside?
Yes, you can, as long as the insulation would be enough to keep them from freezing.
And freezing is like 32 degrees?
Yeah, 32 degrees or lower.
Okay. Thank you.
They normally don't like temperatures below 40 degrees. So if you can keep them in an area that they don't freeze, so that temperature doesn't get below 40, they will continue to work slowly, but they will continue to work. So mostly it's recommended that unless the worms are inside, if the worms are outside, like I said, they need to be in a bin or area where they can access the ground and get away from the freezing cold. Then they'll come back to where the food is.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you were there to answer this question for us.
No
Might as well go to the source. I can leave
Thank
you
you, Rocky.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
To continue with the questions, Martha would like to know, have you ever transplanted an aeroponics plant starter from aeroponics into the soil? And if so, does the plant do well?
You know, I have not. And that is something that I would have to research, because that is not something I have ever done. So what I would suggest is that you could call the plant clinic office and talk to, and I'm not sure if they've started actually working. I think they have they're starting soon, where they're going to have master gardeners working the plant clinic. But that would be a great question for them, because they would be able to research that and help you.
Thank you. I think this is a follow-up to the Monsanto question, because Kim is saying, in parentheses, I meant nurseries or places to buy seeds. Do you suggest territorial for our region?
You know, there are a lot of seed companies, and I know a lot of people do buy from territorial. Again, as you know, OSU does not advocate for a specific seed company or a nursery, but I can say that I have purchased from territorial. I've gotten seeds from them, and I've done well with them. But again, you can go to the Central Oregon publication on the nursery resources, and the nurseries are there, and you can talk to some other people about which companies they're actively using, but OSU doesn't endorse a specific company.
Thank you. This is a question that comes up every year. Does OSU Extension do soil testing?
They don't do it, but there is a link on that gardening publications website that will take you to a publication that tells you which companies and labs do soil testing for our area. And I caution that you use there are a couple that are very specific to Central Oregon soil, because some of them don't pay attention to that. And on that publication, it will tell you there are one or two specific labs that do test for our area. Do you know what they are, Phil?
No,
No. Yeah, but there is a link, and when you go to the garden publications link, scroll down, and soil testing is a specific link on the website, and go to that, and it will tell you how to do it and which labs to contact.
I think that Plant Clinic also has, last year we had a list of some in the area that did it. So when they open
we do.
they'll probably have it.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
But no, it would be lovely if we could test the soil, but we don't have the capacity or the ability to do that.
All right, thank you. Laurel, hi, Laurel again. Are there specific resources for finding plants that are dog friendly, like pea resistant and non-toxic?
Well,
Come on, Vickie, you know everything.
No, well, the thing about pets is that most of the time people are concerned about planting things that are poisonous to their pets. And there are several resources online that identify plants that you shouldn't put in your landscape because they are toxic to your dogs and your cats. But pea resistant and non-toxic. I would have to, that's a good research question.
Plant Clinic.
Plant Clinic. Yeah. I'm sorry, Plant Clinic people. I'm doing a lot of that referral for that, because that really would require a search to see what plant material is not really impacted by doggy urine and stuff like that.
Thank you. That's a very good answer. Jennifer, we've been talking about sandy soil, but she says she has clay soil out in Prineville. Should she add sand?
Again, that's one of those things where I'd have to know a little bit more about your soil. But in general, I think that if you go to soil amendments and our resources about amending the soil do talk about more than just our sterile soil, because we do have differing soil qualities throughout our region. And the critical thing is amending it and making it so that it is healthy for the roots to thrive, whether it's clay or whether it's sand or loam. I mean, you want loamy soil would be good, but it's to say, yes, add sand. I don't feel I'm qualified to say that without actually really knowing more about your soil. And what you may want to do is, even though you know that it's clay, is that you may want to have it tested so that you know what you need to do to amend it. And if not, then just start amending it with compost and go from there. And if you have to add some soil, but knowing the actual constitution of the soil will tell you whether or not you need to add. What you need to add is what it will do.
Okay, we're just about done here. And they're still coming in. Rocky says that Rocky, you could speak up. She says that sand and clay makes concrete.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. That's what I'm saying is that if you can amend with good compost is always your friend. So, I mean, that's just a good rule of thumb. And remember the equation that I gave you, 1/3 amendment to 2/3 native soil, whatever that native soil is. And it may take you a long period of time. And for me, I've been in my house for 10 years, and the parts of my landscape that are in the ground, I have been working on amending that and working with that soil for 10 years. I never give up with it because you can't just amend it and say, okay, I'm done. You can't. You got to keep at it. This is a life journey here. It is. And in some ways, it's like a marriage, because once you make this commitment to your garden, you got to keep at it. You got to keep nurturing it.
It's true. But that's the joy, isn't it? We only get about 6 months of it. So, then we get a break for the winter, except for watering the trees. Jennifer's adding that I guess she's in the clay soil and it's sticky and her plants struggle like crazy. So amend. I just gonna throw in some things that have come out here, as like Laurel, who's been asking the question, says she has 3 huskies. So kudos to you.
Yeah.
And Cindy is one of our master gardeners, has information that plant clinic starts the week of April 10th, but only from 9 to 1 for the first month or so. So those of you who are still interested in plant clinic. And Chris Cornchild, one of our master gardeners, says Washington State University has a good publication called Deer Control in the Home Garden. They recommend 8-foot fences for mule deer unless it's a solid fence, which can be lower. So maybe, the solid fence they can't see through. And that
I've got a 6-foot cyclone fence and they've never gone over it. But, I think this is one of those things where there is no one right answer. It really, and I hate to keep sounding like it depends, but it does depend. It depends on what you have in your landscape. It depends on whether or not you've got features in your backyard. It depends on where you are. If you're in an HOA, you can't have an 8-foot fence. My HOA would not allow that. We are limited in what we're allowed to have. So, it really does depend on your specific circumstances, but there is always a solution that you can find regardless of where you are. But ultimately, you have to define what your tolerance level is for the deer, because we're going to live with them. And if they can't get in my backyard, but they stroll right up my sidewalk and they will nibble on anything they can get their heads to. So what is your tolerance level? And come to understand, and you just need to make peace with the fact that you're going to provide some stuff for the deer and some stuff for you.
That is a
Right.
you agree, Phil.
That's right.
That is a great last question. And that was all of our questions, except for a lot of people that have jumped in and said, thank you, excellent presentation. And I learned a lot, as I always do. So thank you for taking your time, Vickie, to do this. And thank you for everyone that has attended. I wanted to just give a little, see if I can find it. I just thank everybody for participating. We will send out those links probably by Monday, Tuesday at the latest. Your feedback helps us improve our webinars. So we wish that you would complete that survey. If you don't do it today, it will pop out another one when we send you the email. So that was it for today. And any other questions, feel free to call the plant clinic. We'll answer all the questions that we can. We'll do the research for you. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Sun's
Thank
coming
you,
out of my
everybody.
house.
I hope I helped you a little bit.
I think
Thank
so.
you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.